everybody. Welcome to our panel on the current and future state of e-commerce and Amazon. Today, we have some really great panelists with us with just a ton of helpful information and perspective. So we have a lot to talk about, so we're just going to jump right into it. But before we do, I just want to do a really quick round of intros. I'll get started. My name is Megan Conahan. I'm EVP at Direct Agents, and I focus on strategic client partnerships with a concentration in e-com and Amazon.
I guess I'm going to go next. My name is Daniel Owen. I'm EVP at Direct Agents. I oversee also our e-com channels, but really diving in deep into our Amazon business, marketplace businesses, as well as other tertiary like search and things like that.
I'm Christy Hayes. Nice to meet you all. I'm Director of Global Marketing at Belkin International, and I oversee our connected home brands, including Linksys and Wemo.
And I'm James Ha. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications for Master and Dynamic, and pretty much oversee all of our consumer-facing marketing efforts across the board.
And repping the Master and Dynamic headphones, I see.
Yes, always. Especially during work from home.
Just a quick note for everybody. As we go through our discussion, if you do have any questions, just feel free to submit them to the Q&A box at the bottom, and if we do have some time, we'll try to get to them. So the first thing I wanted to discuss with you guys was just your relationship with retail. You know, if you were just on with Chieh, he said he thinks retail is going to die. I think it was like a slow crab-like death, which I've never heard that comparison. So I really love that. But you both sell products both on like .coms, but then you've also really both relied on retail to drive sales. So, you know, with all of the people shopping online and retail kind of having this disruptive period right now, you know, how do you see your partnership with retail is going to play out, you know, for the rest of 2020, but then into just the future, next year, just indefinite future?
Sure.
Go ahead, James.
Oh, sure. So I think it's actually a great question, and it's definitely one that I think many businesses are actually thinking through, especially if you're heavier in your footprint overall from a physical retail. Overarching though, I still see a continuous place for the physical retail. What it looks like is really the question overall. So it's not to say, like, from my standpoint that I think retail goes away altogether. It's just going to be a reimagining of exactly how your online versus your offline offering is going to be. I mean, for Master and Dynamic, we continue to think it's ideal to have both an online and offline presence, especially when it comes to certain products like even ours in the headphone space. People want to touch and feel it at times before they're willing to actually buy it. So without that physical tactile experience overall, it kind of also creates a whole other challenge for customers there. But I do think, like, as everything has kind of happened in light of COVID, our economic sort of status overall, even recently more so the social injustice and the movement there, it has created a very, very interesting time frame for marketers, because you really need to concentrate on the moment and kind of lean into a lot of the customer trends that are happening right now, while you also kind of think about the future and how that evolves and how sort of the customer is going to evolve alongside with that, and what stays and what actually like really becomes more of a fad just in the moment of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for us, like, COVID will forever change retailing. It had a pretty enormous impact on our e-commerce initially with products, and we saw a massive increase in traffic coming to our website, but conversion was actually lower than before, which to us indicated there's a lot of window shopping that's happening. And so overall, we've had to place a greater emphasis on what we can do to improve our e-commerce, speed up our checkout process, and really help drive conversion. And typically, we've just been more focused as an organization on our retail partners, and it's really forced us to dive in and evaluate our marketing strategies with our retail partners. So they still are a huge factor in our partnership and how we drive our business overall, but it's just finding that balance, right?
And I will add one thing from a data perspective that we've been tracking. So we do track, as Josh pointed out earlier, states as they open, reopen, infection rates, COVID, things like that. And we plot that against revenue per session. So what we do see is that revenue per session is actually higher in states that have been closed or, you know, are not quickly reopening. I think what that says is that, you know, obviously the inverse is that they're lower in places where states are open. So the consumer, given the choice, looks like they will still choose to, both retail online and offline, right? So I think that's at least initially what we're seeing so far. I don't know if that's a trend that is going to continue, but I do think, businesses that are able to do things like, try before you buy or in home and things like that. Maybe it's a evolving, right? It's a evolving type of retail, and I think that's the way that the future will be, for retail going forward. I do think that there's a big pickup and surge that we do see, of course, in all areas for digital sales. But at the same time, we do see also consumers still choosing, if they have the choice, to go in store and things like that.
Yeah, and I think James's point was interesting, where obviously Master and Dynamic is much more of like a luxury product versus Christy, you have products at all price ranges. So I think it will be really interesting to see how that kind of shakes out. If consumers are really going to go back to retail for everything, or if it really is for just those higher end kind of purchases where you really want to try in store or feel the product, hear the product, etc.
I agree overall. And like one other thing that constantly kind of sits in the back of my head is more so from a consumer perspective. Shopping isn't just for the transaction. Like to many people, it's also a social activity. So in light of that sort of insight for customers as well, it's not to say that people are going to be like, okay, I can give up that entire social activity now with my friends and all I'm going to do is shop online. It's how does that evolve for customers? Do they switch sort of their perspectives ultimately in the long term? And what are sort of the different ways that that can manifest itself? Because it's going to be replaced with something else, which then also, as any brand marketer will think about, is it changes also your media mix at that point. Because you may not be actually buying into out of home in the normal areas anymore. If people shift their locations, you're going to actually really need to think about where the eyeballs are going to start going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, 100% agree. And as an organization, we've also been challenged to, look at our finances and make sure that we're choosing the right mediums that drive the highest conversion. So we haven't had the luxury to be at like a big awareness level play right now. So out of home, as you said, that doesn't make sense. People aren't driving right now. Focus those efforts on what's converting sales and capturing people where they're searching and spending time on social.
Yeah. The other big thing that, we saw as a team is in the past few months, just upticks across some of those secondary marketplaces, right? Like eBay, Walmart, because I know obviously your .com is really big, retail is really big, and Amazon, but we've seen, like I said, eBay, Walmart, et cetera, really have a little bit of a growth spike in the last couple of months. So is this something that you guys think is here to stay? Do you think people like try these secondary marketplaces out and they're like, yes, this is great, I like them? Or do you think this was just like a temporary, I need my product now, I'll get it from wherever I can get it, and we're going to go back to kind of status quo?
That's a hard question. That's a really hard question. I mean, I think those behaviors are here to stay. We are going to see, as James said, people go back to stores as they're starting to open. But I mean, so many brands were able to adapt so quickly, which brands that did that are the ones that are winning. I think Walmart in particular did a fantastic job about changing their e-commerce strategy. They had, these quick picks of products that people were buying, like the mass-produced, all the things they were looking for, like health and wellness and soup and fitness equipment. And they created these collections that were readily available on their site. So I think they did a really fantastic job. They even had a virtual party essentials because that's what people were doing. So they addressed the consumer behavior so quickly. And I think that kind of behavior is definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that in terms of that there is momentum, and we've definitely seen it. There were definitely people also prior to COVID who were much more reluctant in terms of even trying online. And this has semi-forced everybody, at least to certain degrees, to try it. So it really just depends on, I think, ultimately in long-term comfort level of the vast majority of customers as to whether or not they sustain that. But what's also more interesting is seeing the reaction from other third-party marketplaces to what's happening at the moment. So in Walmart's announcement with their actual new partnership with Shopify, being able to actually expand their third-party marketplace. In addition to that, Facebook Commerce, with them being able to ingest other people's like actual feeds and everything there, it gives you also really sort of that early indicator that those platforms aren't going to go. They're being built to expand sort of the digital offering and make it easier for customers. So I do see a lot of sort of the efforts that will probably continue to stay and grow even more exponentially there, giving people a lot more opportunity to test out different ways of how you want to actually convert and where you want to convert. So it kind of does bring it back to an interesting sort of mix overall, because with the emergence in a more diversified sort of retailer portfolio alongside with your own D2C marketplace, it becomes a competitive marketplace for yourself. And so I think that's where it becomes even more critical in the times right now where everything is heavy digital. Profitability, top line gains is all about your efficiency and spend in performance marketing. And we know that majority of the hardworking sort of areas, Google and Facebook and everything else are really auction based. You just have to be very, very careful as to how you lay out those strategies right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you guys both feel like you'll start paying a little more attention to those secondary marketplaces, or is still kind of just like a wait and see, continue to watch how they shake up through the rest of the year before you invest more in them?
From Master and Dynamics perspective, we're definitely taking a look at everything. I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I do also oversee all of our third-party marketplace marketing as well. So it's a very holistic view, which gives us the capability and also the flexibility to shift sort of the whole entire marketing strategy to where it needs to go. So I think in overarching and how we really look at the business, it's really to invest in areas that we know there are inherent sort of customer bases built in for our products, and other areas, if there's quick and easy ways for us to test and iterate on those, we'll definitely test those out. But I think it's one of those other challenges is as that landscape gets more like fragmented and there's a lot more opportunities, it becomes a lot more critical to think about which partners you're bringing on board, which retailers you're choosing to go into, because it has an impact sort of across the board on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I wanted to kind of touch base with both of you on is just how you pivoted your .com site, because you both made some, significant changes when all of this started happening, 4-ish months ago, so more people are obviously buying through e-com. So what did you guys do to change that experience and take advantage of some of that increased traffic, as well as like, obviously the traffic is also more diverse. So what were the things that you really focused on doing to your .com site to just really capitalize on that?
Yeah, for us, we are going through a complete overhaul on all of our .coms. I mean, we were looking at a refresh anyway, but this helped us speed up the process for sure. So we looked at what adjustments can we make quickly in the short term, and one of those that we added was adding Apple Pay to checkout, so our consumers could more quickly check out. They don't want to put all their details in; they just want to double click the button and be done. And so that's one thing that we were able to optimize and do quickly. And the second is content. We looked at collections, what product collections could we feature, similar to the Walmart example I just gave, based on what products people are searching for. And so we created collections for helping people be more productive at home. There was so much content around that we were able to create some resource center articles that we could work with search to drive more traffic to our site. So having fresh content, better checkouts, and then making collections more readily available.
Mm-hmm.
And from Master and Dynamics standpoint, we definitely also kind of took a relook at everything, but we're also very fortunate because we know we produce a product that actually supports and helps customers with their productivity. With sort of work from home and those individuals who were able to work from home, we knew that we had an opportunity there to kind of help out. And so this is where I feel like from a branding and a marketing standpoint, we were able to really lean into a lot of the shifting customer behaviors and trends happening. Knowing and obviously working with direct agents, we also knew that headphones and wireless headphones were one of the most like sought after actual categories during that transition period. So we were also able to actually create certain promotions where we could offer discounts to our customers to support them from working from home. While similarly, we also recognized that people wanted to help out, especially in their local communities. Everybody's actually seeing that impact overall. So we were also very, very excited to be able to partner with City Harvest and all those other individuals to give back to the local community so that as people continue to purchase, we knew we were doing one hand a help to them, but at the same time, also giving them the opportunity to contribute back to the communities that they actively like participated in and cared about as well. But I also think it's very important to also note that this time around, you're starting to see some of consumers really hold brands much more accountable for things that you're actually doing. So it's really important from this year to kind of walk the walk. And from our perspective, it's really not just talking the talk, it's walking the walk. So what we also did was found opportunities where we were able to also donate PPE back to Mount Sinai and also Presbyterian Hospital so that there is a constant flow of showing and where we have the capability of integrating to it into our plans, how we actually continue to support like our local community, causes that we actually really care about, and while we actually do justice for supporting our actual customers in times of challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. I completely agree. And COVID actually helped us fast track starting a new category of products on the Belkin side. We are looking at health and wellness. We have such great manufacturing capabilities that we are able to fast track additional masks that we can build and ventilator machines. And so we're looking at our overall business portfolio as well because of this.
We have a couple of questions that we're going to turn to now. So the first is about product returns. So it said, how are product returns factored in and impacting customer experience, brand trust, sales, and value? So I don't know if either of you have any takes on that or what's going on that product return side.
Sure. I definitely have encountered some interesting shifts when it comes to sort of customer service. I do think that this is a very unique and different time frame because you are oftentimes now also not only just handling your standard sort of customer service returns and sort of complaints, but it's now kind of spilled over in light of the economy and people's sort of financial struggles. You also do get the stories now and certain questions from customers where they can have buyer's remorse, especially with the luxury product, and we understand that. So I think it's actually forced our brand to re-look at, as a brand, how do we want to approach empathy with customers that way? Because it might be sort of a short-term little hit at the moment where we help out a customer, but that goodwill in itself builds a longer-term sort of relationship with that customer. It is interesting to see because during the recent times, and I do think it has much more so to do with economic factors and ultimately where people's financial situations are, that there is a bit more of an increase in terms of returns overall. Whether or not there's a depression in sale, you kind of see some of that and you kind of are anticipating that there will be that pickup there. That being said, like as it kind of ebbs and flows with the news on the economy and we can kind of see like how like those actual return factors do come back. So it's interesting to kind of keep our eye on that where we ultimately see like news that comes out that immediate day can have pretty immediate effect on some of those actual actions from a customer standpoint.
It's interesting.
But on top of that, it also opens up like considerations because as returns come back, it is thinking through like, what do you do with that inventory as well? And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are thinking it through. And so at times it's exploring the other avenues from a strategy standpoint as to how you can diversify your business to actually cater to some of those. Like, as you were mentioning, like as eBay's coming up, do you actually start a stream on eBay and actually sell your refurbished product and refurb that product there? Do you look at other channels and opportunities to open it up? Because I do think in light of not only everything that we've been dealing with, people are still very cognizant in terms of other social issues like climate change. So if you can help them save some money, but actually reduce waste in a way, you still have that customer and that value set that you can definitely cater to and engage with.
Yeah.
We're also seeing some policies being built because you can't fully return all products if they were opened due to any kind of COVID risks. Have you guys faced any of that at all, or built any of those types of policies?
We haven't really shifted too much of our policies overall. We've been handling a lot of them much more on a case-by-case basis because we know that a lot of those scenarios are coming in. But in terms of that, I think it is also not trying to change it entirely upon a customer, because there's also the considerations of, well, who purchased just recently prior to this? And if we change all the policies, it's like, how does that impact certain past customers as well? And so I think like there's definitely some complexities in considering that overall, but I think like in the immediate and the short term, the resolution to that was we need to be definitely more empathetic to our customers and the plights that they're going through, but let's take it case by case and see if it gets to a volume where it becomes non-manageable. But so far, it hasn't really gotten to that point. It's just more so you need to engage with those customers who really need to be heard to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple more questions. The next one is on the process of acquiring new content, imagery and video, how has that changed? You're both very lucky that, I don't want to say lucky, but that you have, very sometimes like product heavy photography and imagery. So, what have you guys been thinking about as you even start considering like lifestyle photo shoots and things like that? Is that something that you're thinking about doing? Is it using UGC? How are you thinking about that now and then in the future?
That was a real big challenge initially. I mean, as a marketer, we have our calendar mapped out for the year, our content plan and strategy, and we were all set to go. And then since COVID, everything had to change and adapt. And so speed was really key here on being able to transition your strategy and your content production. And we ended up doing home photo shoots, sending products to people where they can capture the product at their home, or relying a lot more on in-house rendering and animations. And then we've also had to reach out to outside agency partners to help us catch up and, create more content that we're not able to normally do through our normal process in-house. So our internal creative agency is, there's only so many of them. They're doing as much as they can. And we've all had to just adjust. And I was really impressed at how well our team was able to do that and still create really great content.
Very similar on the master and dynamic side. This was definitely a challenge to figure out. But I do think in some of these moments where there are challenges, you oftentimes come up with some really, really creative solutions. So the team that we do have at Master and Dynamic that oversees all of the creative, they're extremely flexible, but also very resourceful. So we definitely have taken a lot more liberties where there are photo shoots at individuals' houses and all of that stuff. But it has really challenged us from a creative standpoint in being much more creative in terms of the resources that you do have available to you, and whether or not it's repurposing certain assets, finding a new creative way to reimagine those assets as well has been a very, very big sort of piece of that creative challenge overall.
Yeah, it's also forced us to test and learn different strategies too. We have found during this process that having more macro shots of our product is actually performing better than just our product in a lifestyle environment. So overall, I think it's changed our direction moving forward as well.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask, are these things that you guys are going to keep doing even when we're back in real life? But it sounds like maybe there'll be some type of hybrid combination of what you were doing versus what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Hopefully one more. This comes from, I think, somebody in London because it references High Street and BBC, but we'll see. But the long and short of it is, when England reopened, people went back on High Street, they went shopping, and when interviewed, they were just pretty much said, well, we were sick of shopping online. So, we said, retail is not going to die off, but do you think it's going to be one of those like, we're back, like everybody go to Target or the mall or, Soho and shop, and then it just kind of goes back? Or do you think it's going to be like a small bump and then pretty consistent?
I mean, from my personal perspective, I think right when businesses start to go back to sort of this new norm, you'll see definitely a pretty significant spike. I think it's just the pent up sort of like demand of being able to be outside, do some of the things that everybody used to be able to do. So we definitely will see a spike during that time frame. I think it'll be very interesting because that spike's going to happen at various different points for everybody. And when those times are is more of the challenge in understanding it, especially when you have a little bit of a longer outlook as well with COVID, to the points where people are talking about when they foresee things semi going back to normal. So I do feel like there will be that spike and you'll normal off somewhere else. I think the bigger unknown is where after you see that spike, where that normal is. Does it show you less people physically shopping in spaces like as it normalizes out, or is it more in digital? With sort of trends that we are seeing and the volume of sort of the amount of people there, I think, and my hope is that there will be a set where it still stays higher on the digital side because of all the new customers that you're introducing to online sales.
Yeah.
But you will still see that actual offline and physical brick and mortar sort of traffic there. But 100% agree with that call out that you probably will see just that pent up spike.
Yeah. And the root of that question is really coming from, what's the future of retail? Which is the $1 million question, right? What's going to happen at retail in the future? People want more interactive experiences. They still want to get out. They still want to socialize. They still want to touch products and fabrics and learn and talk to people. But it's less about just massive quantities of product. It's more about that interaction. So we don't have the answers to that completely, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah. And last question, or one of the last question, is just how do you, can you discuss ways that your customer acquisition changed in the last few months? So changes in budget, were you testing new strategies? What would be your recommendation for marketers that are very focused on customer acquisition, which is really, both of you?
Changes in budget, new strategy. I mean, we've had to take a look at all of it, right? We've had to look at how fast people are checking out. What's the consumer journey? And a lot of this goes back to what we're trying to change overall through our e-commerce channels. So we're not only looking at our own DTC, like James said, we're looking at this whole process through our retail perspective and how can we better optimize content? How can we improve the process? And just be better at getting them the assets that they need in a timely manner, and just being a better strategic partner overall.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people maybe kind of stopped marketing in fear, and I don't think either of you were in that, or I know neither of you were in that boat, but just really taking advantage of some of the things that maybe like you wanted to try. Like now is a time, I think Josh was talking about in the first section, this is the time to disrupt. This is the time you're either stagnant or you're growing, and both of you, I think, really went to that, okay, what do we do? How do we grow? How do we keep pivoting? Like, is it new marketing channels, whatever? So I think that was a very interesting thing to see which brands kind of went which ways.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things, like as you talk about acquisition as well, as horrible as everything is that has happened, like at the beginning half of the year, and where all the challenges came in, it actually created an opportunity. When we talk about acquisition, lack of inventory, mismatch actual supply and demand, from the COVID side of things, actually creates a forced scenario where people have to test other things. So it makes acquisition easier from that standpoint. But not only that, like in light of everything also that's recently happened, that becomes also, in my mind, another opportunity as people take a slowdown already from the economic scenario, COVID, to actually reevaluate their consumption behaviors. The social injustice sort of movement that's happening right now is also doing exactly the same, where we can see people going, I'm abandoning this retailer that I used to shop at every single week, and I'm going to try something else. And when you have consumer behaviors like that, it actually creates an opportunity for you to acquire new customers, to beat out your actual competition and what you provided to your, like, their customers as well, to give them sort of an opportunity to experience something else and potentially create a long-term customer lifetime, like, out of that person. So I think that's why it's also, from my perspective, it was important to keep pulse on marketing and not to slow down the acquisition, but to capitalize on the opportunity to speak to new people, speak to new audiences while they're in a frame of mind of reevaluating their entire sort of consumption and purchasing habits.
Yeah.
You have to be so careful about that, though, because so many brands were slammed during COVID for being seen as opportunistic.
Yes.
Or being on the wrong side of Black Lives Matter, and they're suffering for it. So there is an opportunity to connect, but you have to be authentic to your brand. You can do it in an emotional and authentic way, then it makes sense. It's not just about selling products.
Yeah, authenticity is key.
And I think in terms of just channels, I think it is really important, you know, and we've seen with you guys as well and other clients, to just realize, you know, where the customers are today as well, right? I mean, them being pushed online, I mean, all of us really, has really pushed, you know, consumers to some of these major platforms out there, right? And I think that, you know, it's important to, and you guys both see it this way as well, because we help you with it. But, you know, Amazon is a secondary site for one, right? I think a lot of clients previously, you know, Amazon may have been an afterthought, and it's kind of like it may be handled by a different team. But what we're seeing is that it's being taken in and considered, you know, under the entire marketing umbrella, right? As a primary, maybe even website, if you want to call it that. Because really what we're realizing is that, you know, we have to service where the consumers are. And if, you know, if it's still your shoppers, right? It's just where your shoppers are today, changing their behavior and preferring to shop. And same with, you know, Walmart. So, I mean, I guess that's a little bit of budget shift that we see with some clients, and testing out, right? I think a lot of it is test, and then let's see, you know, where things fall. And, you know, there are different demographics for each type of platform for what we're seeing, at least different types of demand, right? With eBay, it's more like auto and electronics and things like that, and maybe not as much, you know, food and types of supplies like that. But, you know, I think it really is realizing where each platform online, each marketplace, where their advantages are, and at the minimum testing it to see, you know, if it works for your brand, if your customers are there. Because if your customers are there, you know, it really does make a difference to present your company, you know, and your messaging, your branding, you know, as beneficially as possible.
Yeah, and we're a little over time, but I want to see if we can get this one last thing really quickly. You know, we talked a lot about predictions, and we went through a lot of them right here, and what's permanent and what's temporary. But, you know, just quickly, I would love to hear what your predictions are for the next, you know, year, 2 years, whatever it might be. Christy, you want to start?
I think the best way for me to look at this is to look back at history and look back at what happened in previous recessions. And we know that brands bounce back. We know that the brands that succeed during this time are the ones that are able to connect with their audience. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, being authentic, and believing in a cause, because consumers they have their eyes open. They are going to call BS if you're not true to that. And so I think there's a real opportunity to seize that and connect with our consumers on a real more personal level, but that requires change from within. And so that's not something we as marketers can take on ourselves. It's an organizational shift, and it has to go to the top and go to the beginning of the process. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that in terms of, I think one of my biggest predictions is customer expectations have skyrocketed in light of everything. So they're exactly as Christy said, in terms of like social actual impact that you're making and walking the walk versus just talking the talk. People are definitely holding companies much more accountable to that. While COVID's going on, we've definitely already seen a lot of studies coming out where it details out that people are going to take a step back and rethink about the way that they consume and that they purchase. And so I think with all these reevaluations that are kind of simultaneously happening, you're going to have a spike, and it will be probably even more competitive to fight for the dollar. Because if people are still going to be a little bit more conscious overall, you know that it requires something else from the business and the brands in itself to be able to actually engage with those customers. But I do agree with Christy, like that requires sort of coming from within the actual brand and the business in itself to rethink, like, how do we cater to some of these behaviors and shifting behaviors that we just don't foresee them actually going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Daniel, any predictions for us?
Outside of brand, I do think that it's almost an inflection point, and apps today, if you have an app, it really is kind of a difference maker too, because of where people are. I mean, think about how consumers shop, their behavior. Food apps are here to stay, I think. You know, the reason Amazon, Walmart are so far ahead is they have built out putting so much development behind their apps as well, right? So I think if you're looking at marketplaces, if you're looking at where to shift that budget, I mean, look at, you know, if they're able to interact with the consumer in the way that the consumers need it the most, right? Or where they are the most, and most of that is in a mobile device and things like that. So, you know, that's one of the differentiators we look at when we're also investing in terms of where, you know, where to go next, or what types of platforms, you know, we think will stick around.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so very much. So for everybody still in attendance, please stick around for our next panel on the future of fashion featuring Nicole and Jane.com. But Christy and James, thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you, everyone.